The blizzard hit La Junta, Colorado without warning on that February afternoon in 1884, turning the world into a swirling mass of white that blinded anyone foolish enough to be caught outside. Yates Jennings had just finished securing his barn doors when he heard what sounded like a cry over the howling wind, faint and desperate, barely human. He stopped, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air, listening hard. There it was again, closer to the ground, near the fence line that separated his property from the open range. He grabbed his lantern and pushed through the knee-deep snow, his boots crunching with each labored step. What he found made his heart stop. A woman lay crumpled against his barn wall, her dark hair matted with snow, her face pale as death itself. Her dress was torn and soaked through, and her hands clutched her swollen belly as her body convulsed with pain. Her eyes fluttered open when the lantern light fell across her face, and she looked at him with such raw terror and desperation that it cut straight through him. "Please," she gasped, her lips blue from cold. "Please help me. The baby is coming." Yates did not hesitate. He swept her up into his arms, shocked at how light she was despite her condition, and kicked open the barn door. The animals inside stirred nervously as he carried her to the back where he kept clean straw and horse blankets. He laid her down as gently as he could, then ran to grab every blanket he owned from the small cabin he called home. The wind tore at him as he made the short journey twice, 3 times, bringing blankets, his one good quilt, towels, a basin of water he had to break the ice from, and anything else his panicked mind could think of. "What's your name?" he asked as he wrapped blankets around her shaking form. Her teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. "Hannah," she managed. "Hannah Anderson." "I'm Yates. You're going to be all right, Hannah, both of you." He had no idea if that was true, but he said it anyway because she needed to hear it. He had delivered foals and calves, but never a human baby. Still, he had steady hands and a clear head, and right now that was all he had to offer. Hannah cried out as another contraction seized her, her back arching off the straw. Her fingers dug into his arm with surprising strength. "It's too soon," she sobbed. "I was traveling to my sister's in Bent's Fort. The stage broke down 5 miles back. I tried to walk. I shouldn't have tried to walk." "You're here now," Yates said firmly. He built up the small stove he kept in the barn for cold nights, feeding it every scrap of wood he could find until heat began to fill the space. The horses and his 3 milk cows provided additional warmth with their body heat. He removed Hannah's frozen boots and stockings, rubbing her feet gently to restore circulation. Her toes were dangerously pale but not yet blackened with frostbite. "Where's your husband?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. A woman this far along should not have been traveling alone. Hannah's face crumpled. "Dead. Killed 3 months ago in a mining accident in Leadville. I had nothing left there. No money, no home. My sister Elizabeth is all I have." Fresh tears streamed down her face, mixing with melted snow. "I sold everything just to afford the stage ticket." Yates felt a surge of anger at a world that could be so cruel, but he pushed it down. Anger would not help her now. "You focus on this baby," he said. "We'll worry about everything else later." The labor intensified as the night deepened. The blizzard raged outside with a fury that made the barn walls shake, but inside Yates worked tirelessly. He boiled water, tore clean strips from an old shirt for bandages, and stayed by Hannah's side through every contraction. She screamed and wept and apologized for screaming and weeping. He held her hand and told her she was doing fine, told her she was the bravest woman he had ever met. "I can't do this," she gasped during a particularly brutal contraction. "I can't. It hurts too much." "Yes, you can," Yates said, his voice steady and sure. "You walked 5 miles in a blizzard. You survived losing your husband. You can do anything." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them in that moment. Trust maybe, or simply the recognition of one human soul by another in the midst of suffering. She nodded and bore down with renewed determination. Just past midnight, with the wind still howling like wolves at the door, Hannah's baby entered the world. Yates caught the tiny, slippery body in his hands, his heart hammering with terror and wonder. The baby was so small, smaller than any newborn animal he had ever seen. For one horrible moment, it did not move or cry, and Yates thought he had failed, thought he had saved Hannah only to lose the child. Then he remembered what his father had told him once about a difficult calf birth. He rubbed the baby's back firmly, clearing its mouth and nose. The infant sputtered, coughed, and then let out a thin wail that was the most beautiful sound Yates had ever heard. "It's a boy," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You have a son." Hannah sobbed with relief as Yates wrapped the baby in the cleanest, warmest cloth he had and placed him in her arms. The infant was red and wrinkled with a shock of dark hair like his mother's. He stopped crying almost immediately when he felt Hannah's warmth, her heartbeat. Mother and child looked at each other, and the barn seemed to fill with a light that had nothing to do with the lantern. Yates tended to Hannah with the same care he had shown throughout the birth. He had no medical training beyond what any rancher learned by necessity, but he was thorough and gentle. He made sure the afterbirth came cleanly, cleaned Hannah up as best he could while preserving her modesty, and gave her water to drink. She was exhausted beyond measure, her face drawn and pale, but alive. They were both alive. "Thank you," Hannah whispered, cradling her son close. "You saved us. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Yates said. "Any decent person would have done the same." "That's not true, and you know it," Hannah said quietly. "Plenty of people would have left me to die rather than risk the trouble of helping." She was right, but Yates did not want to think about that. Instead, he made a makeshift bed of straw and blankets, ensuring Hannah and the baby were warm and comfortable. He settled nearby, feeding the stove and keeping watch. The blizzard showed no signs of stopping, and even if it did, Hannah was in no condition to travel. They would be here together for a while. As dawn broke gray and cold over the snow-buried landscape, Yates finally allowed himself to rest. He dozed sitting up, his back against a support beam, waking every hour to check on his unexpected guests. Hannah slept deeply, the kind of sleep that comes after tremendous physical ordeal, while her baby nursed and slept in turns. When Hannah woke that afternoon, she found Yates cooking something over the barn stove. The smell made her stomach clench with hunger. She had not eaten since the previous morning. "I don't have much," Yates apologized, bringing her a tin plate. "Salt pork and beans, some cornbread from yesterday." "It's perfect," Hannah said gratefully. She ate slowly, carefully, mindful of her body's needs. The baby slept tucked against her side, wrapped in what she now realized was a very fine wool blanket, probably the nicest thing Yates owned. "The storm is still going strong," Yates reported. "I need to check on my animals in the cabin and bring back more supplies. I'll be as quick as I can." "We'll be fine," Hannah assured him. Though the thought of being alone made her anxious, she was not sure why. This man was a stranger, yet she trusted him completely. Yates fought his way through the storm to his cabin, which was barely visible through the white curtain of snow despite being only 50 yards from the barn. Inside he gathered food, more blankets, dry clothes that might fit Hannah if she rolled up the sleeves and legs, and his mother's old sewing basket from when she had been alive. He filled a pack with everything and made the trek back, arriving breathless and covered in snow. Over the next 3 days, the blizzard imprisoned them together in the barn. Yates slept in the cabin at night despite the storm, knowing it was improper to spend the night in close quarters with an unmarried woman. But he was there in the barn from first light until well after dark. They talked to pass the time, their voices soft so as not to wake the baby. Hannah told him about her life in Leadville, about her husband Michael, who had been a good man with bad luck, always chasing the next big strike that never came. She told him about the accident that had taken him, a tunnel collapse that killed 7 men, and how the mining company had given her $50 and told her to vacate the company housing within a week. She had been 6 months pregnant, alone in a mining town with no family, no friends close enough to help, and no money. Her sister Elizabeth's letters had been her lifeline, promising a home and help with the baby. I should have waited until after the baby came to travel, Hannah said, watching her son sleep in the nest of blankets they had made for him. But I was so afraid I would have the baby alone in some boarding house room, afraid I would run out of money before I could leave. I thought I had time. The baby was not due for another month. You did what you thought was best, Yates said. That's all anyone can do. In turn, Yates told Hannah about his life as a rancher. He had come to La Junta 5 years ago from Kansas, buying this land cheap because the previous owner had given up after 2 hard winters. He had built everything himself, the cabin and the barn and the fences, working sunrise to sunset every day. He ran cattle when he could afford to buy them, took odd jobs in town when he could not, and slowly, painfully built something that was his. Don't you get lonely out here by yourself? Hannah asked. Yates was quiet for a moment. Sometimes, he admitted. I had a girl back in Kansas, Rebecca. We were engaged to be married, but her father did not think I had good enough prospects, and she listened to him, married a banker's son instead. I came west to start over, to build something that would be enough. Enough for what? Hannah asked gently. Enough for a life? Enough to be proud of? Enough that a woman might look at me and see someone worth staying with? Hannah looked at him then, this tall, lean man with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes, who had saved her life and asked nothing in return. You're more than enough, she said softly. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool. Something flickered in Yates's expression, surprise and pleasure, and something deeper he quickly hid. They did not speak of it again, but the air between them had shifted, grown warmer. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke. The world outside was transformed, buried under 3 feet of snow that glittered blindingly in the sunlight. Yates dug a path from the barn to the cabin, then began the arduous task of clearing the road. Hannah watched from the barn doorway, wrapped in blankets with her baby in her arms. The child still had no name. She could not seem to choose one, though Yates had suggested several good strong names like James or William or Thomas. A week passed, then 2. The snow melted slowly under the thin winter sun. Hannah regained her strength day by day, helped by the simple but nourishing food Yates provided and the warmth of the cabin, which he had insisted she move into while he slept in the barn. She protested, but he would not hear otherwise. It was not proper for her to sleep in a barn like an animal, he said firmly, and his mother would rise from her grave and thrash him if he allowed it. Hannah found herself thinking about Yates constantly. She noticed things about him, small things. The way he always checked on the baby first when he came in from his work, his big, rough hands so gentle as he touched the infant's tiny fingers, the way he sang under his breath while he worked, old songs she half remembered from her childhood, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, his expression soft and wondering, as if she were something precious and unexpected. She should not feel this way, she told herself sternly. Michael had been dead less than 4 months. It was too soon, too quick, improper in every way, but her heart did not seem to care about propriety. Every time Yates came through the door, every time he smiled at her, every time he held her baby and made silly faces to coax out a toothless grin, she felt something bloom wider in her chest. One evening as they sat by the fire, the baby asleep in the cradle Yates had built from scrap wood, Hannah finally voiced the question that had been troubling her. I need to get to Bent's Fort, she said quietly, to my sister, but I have no money for the stage and I cannot walk with the baby, especially not in winter. Yates was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. You could stay here, he finally said, not looking at her, for as long as you need, until spring at least, when the roads are better and travel is safer. I cannot impose on you any longer, Hannah said, though her heart leaped at his words. You have been more than kind, but you did not sign up to feed and house 2 extra mouths through the winter. You're not an imposition." Yates turned to look at her then, his eyes serious. "Hannah, I want you to stay. I like having you here. I like having the baby here. This cabin has never felt like a home before, but it does now." Hannah's breath caught. "Yates, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he replied simply. "Stay through the winter. Spring will come. And if you still want to go to your sister, I'll take you there myself, but give this a chance. Give us a chance." "Us?" Hannah whispered. Yates stood and crossed to kneel by her chair. He took her hand carefully, as if she were made of glass. "I know it's too soon," he said. "I know you're still grieving your husband, but Hannah, these past weeks with you have been the best of my life. I care about you. I care about your boy. I want to take care of you both if you'll let me." Tears filled Hannah's eyes. "I care about you too," she admitted. "I shouldn't, not so soon, but I do. You're a good man, Yates Jennings, the best I have ever known." "Then stay," he said again. "No obligations, no expectations, just stay and let's see what happens." Hannah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Yates lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. The winter deepened its grip on Colorado, but inside the little cabin, warmth and something like happiness took root. Hannah kept house, cooking and cleaning and mending Yates's worn clothes. She sang to the baby, who she finally named Samuel, after her father. Yates worked the ranch, tending his animals and repairing equipment, always coming home as early as he could manage to spend time with Hannah and Samuel. They talked for hours every evening, learning each other in the way of two people falling carefully, deliberately, in love. Hannah learned that Yates had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh, that he was deeply kind but also stubborn as a mule when he believed he was right, that he had wanted to be a teacher when he was young, but his family had needed him on the farm, that his favorite meal was apple pie, but he had not had one in 5 years because he could not make it himself worth a damn. Yates learned that Hannah was stronger than she looked, with a will of iron beneath her quiet demeanor, that she sang beautifully, hymns and folk songs that filled the cabin with sweetness, that she had wanted 6 children, a whole brood to fill a house with noise and love, but Michael had said they could not afford more than one, that she loved thunderstorms and winter mornings and the smell of fresh bread baking. One night in late March, as winter finally began to loosen its hold, Hannah was putting Samuel down in his cradle when Yates spoke from his chair by the fire. "I love you, Hannah." She froze, her hand still on the baby's back. When she turned to look at him, Yates was standing, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "I know I should not say it," he continued. "I know it's too soon, and I'm not trying to pressure you, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you. I love Samuel. I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to give that boy my name and give you the life you deserve. I want to build something beautiful with you, something that lasts." Hannah crossed the room to him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Michael was a good man," she said quietly. "I cared for him, and I grieve him. But Yates, what I feel for you is different, stronger. You have shown me what it means to be truly cherished. How could I not love you after that?" Yates's eyes went wide with hope. "You mean it?" "I mean it," Hannah said, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her, soft and sweet and full of promise. She kissed him back, wrapping her arms around his neck, feeling safe and wanted and home for the first time in longer than she could remember. They were married 3 weeks later by the preacher in La Junta, with half the town in attendance despite barely knowing either of them. News of the woman who had nearly died giving birth in a blizzard and the cowboy who had saved her had spread, and the people of La Junta were hungry for a happy ending. Hannah wore a simple blue dress that the preacher's wife had altered for her, and Yates wore his one good suit that smelled of cedar from the trunk where it had been stored. Samuel, now 2 months old and thriving, slept through the ceremony in the arms of Mrs. Peterson, who ran the general store and had declared herself the baby's honorary grandmother. After the wedding, there was a celebration at the church hall. People brought food and well wishes, pressing gifts into the newlyweds' hands, a set of china plates from the Hendersons who ran the hotel, fabric for baby clothes from Mrs. Peterson, a side of bacon from Tom Crawford, who owned the saloon and had a soft heart beneath his gruff exterior. It was overwhelming and wonderful, and Hannah felt tears prick her eyes at the generosity of these people who barely knew her. As the party wound down and they prepared to head home, Elizabeth Anderson appeared in the doorway. Hannah's sister, who Hannah had not seen in over a year, who she had been traveling to when the blizzard hit. Elizabeth was thin and careworn, with Hannah's same dark hair but harder eyes. She looked at Hannah holding her baby, standing beside her new husband, and her expression was complicated. "Elizabeth!" Hannah exclaimed, handing Samuel to Yates so she could embrace her sister. "How did you know?" "I received your letter saying you never arrived," Elizabeth said. "I came as soon as I could get away. I thought you were dead." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I almost was," Hannah admitted. "If not for Yates, Samuel and I would have frozen to death." Elizabeth looked at Yates, assessing him with a sharp gaze. "And now you are married?" "Yes," Hannah said firmly. "I love him, Elizabeth. He is a good man." Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "I am glad you are alive and happy. Truly. I just wish you had made it to me. I wanted to help you." "You can still help me," Hannah said warmly. "You can visit us. You can be Samuel's aunt and know his new father. Yates, this is my sister Elizabeth Anderson. Elizabeth, this is my husband, Yates Jennings." Yates offered his hand, which Elizabeth shook after a moment's hesitation. "Any family of Hannah's is family of mine," Yates said. "You are welcome in our home any time." Elizabeth's expression softened slightly. "I may take you up on that. Bent's Fort is not so far." They parted with promises to write and visit, and then Yates drove Hannah and Samuel home in the wagon he had borrowed for the occasion. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the spring air was mild and sweet. Hannah leaned against her new husband's shoulder, feeling happier than she had thought possible 6 months ago. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked softly. "About how strange life is," Hannah replied. "How I thought I was going to die, and instead I found everything I did not know I was looking for." "That makes two of us," Yates said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. That night, in the privacy of their cabin, Yates loved Hannah with a tenderness that made her weep. He treated her like she was precious, like she was the answer to prayers he had stopped believing would be answered. Afterward, she lay in his arms, listening to his heartbeat, feeling more at peace than she ever had in her life. "I want to give you those 6 children you dreamed of," Yates murmured into her hair. "Fill this place with noise and love just like you wanted." Hannah laughed softly. "We have time. Samuel is not even walking yet." "I know," Yates said, "but I want you to know I want it too. I want everything with you, Hannah, everything." "Then we will have everything," she promised, and kissed him again. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. Yates's ranch grew slowly, steadily, as he added cattle and expanded his land. Hannah transformed the cabin, sewing curtains and braiding rugs and planting a garden that yielded vegetables all summer long. Samuel grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy who toddled after his father everywhere, mimicking his walk and his work. When Samuel was 2, Hannah gave birth to twin girls, Rose and Lily, who came into the world screaming their displeasure at the April rain. Yates paced outside the bedroom where the doctor attended Hannah, nearly worn a hole in the floorboards with his worry. When the doctor emerged with the news that Hannah and both babies were healthy, Yates nearly collapsed with relief. "Twins," he kept saying in wonder as he held his daughters for the first time. They were tiny, red-faced, perfect. "We have twins." "You said you wanted 6 children," Hannah teased from the bed, exhausted but glowing. "We are halfway there now." Yates laughed, a sound of pure joy, and kissed her soundly. "You are amazing. Have I told you that lately?" "Not in at least an hour," Hannah replied, smiling. 2 years later came another boy, Jacob, who had Yates's gray eyes and Hannah's quick smile. The cabin was bursting at the seams, so Yates spent that winter building an addition, 2 new bedrooms and a proper parlor. Hannah sewed all the curtains and bedding by hand, her needle flying even as she nursed the baby and kept track of the older children. Elizabeth visited often, becoming a beloved aunt to the growing brood. She married eventually a blacksmith from Bent's Fort named George, who was quiet and steady and treated her well. They had 2 children of their own, and the cousins grew up playing together on the rare occasions both families could gather. Life was full and busy and sometimes overwhelmingly hard. There were bad winters and dry summers, sick animals and tight money. There were childhood illnesses that turned Hannah's hair gray with worry, especially the winter Rose developed a terrible fever that lasted 3 days. There were arguments and frustrations and moments when they were both so tired they could barely speak. But there was also laughter that echoed through the house. There were birthdays celebrated with cake and singing. There were quiet moments stolen between children's demands when Yates would pull Hannah into his arms and dance with her in the kitchen to no music but their own heartbeats. There were summer evenings on the porch watching the children catch fireflies. There were winter nights curled up together in bed while snow fell outside, and the children slept safely in their rooms. When Samuel was 8, he asked Hannah about his real father. She had known this day would come and had prepared for it, but it still made her heart ache. "Your father's name was Michael Anderson," she told him gently. "He was a miner in Leadville, and he died before you were born. He was a good man who worked hard and tried his best." "Did he want me?" Samuel asked, his young face serious. "Very much," Hannah assured him. "He used to talk to you before you were born through my belly. He would tell you stories and sing you songs. He loved you, Samuel, even though he never got to meet you." "But Papa is my real father," Samuel said firmly. "Right?" Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "Yates is the father who raised you and loved you and chose you every single day. Yes, sweetheart. He is your real father in every way that matters." "Good," Samuel said, satisfied, and ran off to help Yates mend the fence. That night Hannah told Yates about the conversation, and he held her while she cried, mourning the husband who had died too young and grateful for the one she had found in the snow. "Samuel is my son," Yates said fiercely, "just as much as Jacob or any of the others. Blood does not make a family. Love does." "I know," Hannah said, "I know." When Samuel turned 13, Yates formally adopted him in the eyes of the law, changing his name from Anderson to Jennings. Samuel stood tall and proud as the judge signed the papers, and when it was done, he hugged Yates so hard neither of them could breathe. "Thank you, Pa," Samuel whispered, and Yates held his oldest son and thought about a February night 11 years ago when he had delivered this boy in a barn during a blizzard, never imagining he would come to love him so completely. More children came, completing the 6 Hannah had dreamed of. Another girl, Grace, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved to read. And finally the youngest, twin boys named Matthew and Mark, who were absolute terrors from the moment they learned to crawl. The cabin additions had additions until it was a proper house, sprawling and comfortable, always full of noise and life. The ranch prospered. Yates's reputation for honest dealing and quality cattle spread, and he was able to hire hands to help with the work. He took on a partner, a young man named David, who reminded him of himself at that age, hungry and determined and willing to work until his hands bled. Together they expanded the operation, buying more land, running more cattle, building something that would last for generations. Hannah became known throughout La Junta for her kindness and her skill as a midwife. After helping several neighbors through difficult births, drawing on her own experience, women began to seek her out specifically. She attended dozens of births over the years, bringing babies safely into the world, and she never lost her sense of wonder at the miracle of new life. The years passed in a blur of seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. Samuel grew up and married a girl from town, a smart, sharp-tongued woman named Alice who kept him on his toes. They built a house on the edge of the ranch property and started their own family. The twins, Rose and Lily, stayed close to home. Marrying brothers from a neighboring ranch and living within riding distance, they visited constantly, their children playing with their younger siblings in that chaotic way of large families. Jacob took after his father in temperament and skill, becoming Yates's right hand in running the ranch. He was in no hurry to marry, content to work hard and court girls without much seriousness. Grace, true to her quiet nature, became a school teacher in La Junta, beloved by her students. And the youngest twins, Matthew and Mark, were still causing trouble at 12 years old, though their mischief was mostly harmless. On a spring evening in 1899, Yates and Hannah sat on the porch of their house watching the sunset. They were both in their 40s now, graying and weathered by years of hard work and harder weather, but still strong. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across the property, the sounds of their laughter floating on the warm breeze. "Do you ever think about that night?" Yates asked quietly. "The blizzard?" "All the time," Hannah admitted. "I think about how easily it could have gone differently if you had been in town that day, if you had not heard me, if you had not been the kind of man who would help a stranger." "If the stage had not broken down," Yates added, "if the baby had not come early, if the blizzard had held off another day." "So many ifs," Hannah said, "but they all led to this, to us, to this life we built together." Yates took her hand, the gesture as natural now as breathing after 15 years of marriage. "Do you ever regret staying? Wonder what your life would have been like if you had gone to Elizabeth?" "Never," Hannah said firmly. "Not once. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Good," Yates said, relief and love coloring his voice, "because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You and the children, you are everything to me." "And you are everything to me," Hannah replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "My rescuer, my partner, my love." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the Colorado sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Samuel emerged from the barn with his oldest son perched on his shoulders, waving at his parents. Rose and Lily were helping prepare dinner in the kitchen, their voices raised in some good-natured argument. Jacob was showing Grace's fiancé how to properly saddle a horse patient, despite the young man's obvious city-bred clumsiness. Matthew and Mark were supposed to be feeding the chickens, but were instead chasing them around the yard, shrieking with laughter. This was their legacy, Yates thought. Not just the land or the cattle or the house, but this family. These children who would have children of their own spreading out across Colorado and beyond, carrying forward the love and strength that had begun in a barn during a blizzard. "I want to expand the north pasture," Yates said suddenly, "and Jacob suggested we try breeding horses in addition to cattle. What do you think?" Hannah laughed. "I think you're supposed to be thinking about slowing down, not taking on more work." "I will slow down when I am dead," Yates said cheerfully. "Besides, I want to leave something for the boys. Samuel has his own place. Jacob will get the main ranch, but Matthew and Mark will need something to build on when they are older." "Those two are only 12, Hannah pointed out. "You have time." "Time goes faster than you think," Yates said softly. "Seems like just yesterday I was carrying you into that barn, and now look at us, grandparents." "I know," Hannah said, "but I would not trade a single day of it, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones, because they made the good ones sweeter." Yates kissed her temple. "You are the wisest woman I know." "And do not you forget it," Hannah replied with mock severity, making him laugh. As darkness fell and stars began to emerge in the vast Colorado sky, the family gathered for dinner. The table, built by Yates years ago and expanded multiple times, was crowded with bodies and plates and serving dishes. Conversation flowed like a river, everyone talking at once, interrupting and laughing and stealing food from each other's plates. Hannah looked around at all these faces she loved, this loud, chaotic, beautiful family, and felt her heart might burst from happiness. After dinner, Samuel pulled out his guitar and started to play. The children gathered around, begging for their favorite songs. Samuel obliged, his strong voice leading them through folk songs and hymns and silly tunes. Hannah sat beside Yates, his arm around her shoulders, and sang along to songs she had once sung to Samuel when he was a baby, never imagining all this would follow. Later, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Yates and Hannah lay together in the darkness of their room. Through the open window they could hear the peaceful sounds of the ranch at night, animals settling, the wind moving through new leaves, the creek that ran along the property's edge. "I have been thinking," Hannah said quietly, "about Leadville, about Michael. I realized the other day that I have been with you twice as long now as I was with him. It feels strange." "Does it make you sad?" Yates asked carefully. "No," Hannah said. "Just thoughtful. Michael was part of my life, and I'm glad I knew him. He gave me Samuel after all, but you, Yates, you gave me everything else. You gave me a home and a family and a love I did not know was possible. You gave me a life worth living." "You gave me those things too," Yates said, his voice rough with emotion. "I was just existing before you, Hannah, working and sleeping and working some more. You taught me what it means to truly live." Hannah turned in his arms so she could see his face in the moonlight filtering through the window. Even after all these years, after 6 children and countless trials, he still looked at her like she hung the stars. "I love you," she said, "more than words can possibly say." "I love you too," Yates replied, "my miracle in the snow." They made love slowly, tenderly, with the deep familiarity of long marriage, but also with the wonder that had never quite faded. Afterward, Hannah fell asleep in Yates's arms, safe and content, dreaming of blizzards that turned into sunshine. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Winters came and went, though none ever quite matched the ferocity of that February blizzard in 1884. Springs brought new calves and new life. Summers brought hard work and harvest. Autumns brought preparations for the cold months ahead. The children grew and changed, found their own paths, made their own families. Samuel and Alice had 4 children, all boys rowdy and energetic. Rose had 3 girls and a boy, while Lily had 5 children in quick succession, keeping her hands more than full. Jacob eventually married a widow with 2 children of her own, becoming an instant family man. Grace married her fiancé, a lawyer from Denver, and moved to the city, though she visited often. Matthew and Mark, as different as twins could be despite looking nearly identical, went their separate ways in their 20s. Matthew took over the horse breeding operation Yates had started, while Mark became a deputy sheriff in La Junta. Yates and Hannah watched it all unfold with pride and occasional heartache, as all parents do. They celebrated weddings and births, mourned losses when Elizabeth passed suddenly from pneumonia, and when George followed her 6 months later from what everyone agreed was a broken heart. They adapted to changes, like when the railroad expanded through La Junta and the town suddenly boomed with new people and new opportunities. Through it all, they remained each other's constant. They still sat on the porch together most evenings, still danced in the kitchen when no one was watching, still reached for each other in the night. The passion of early marriage had mellowed into something deeper and more abiding, a love built on decades of choosing each other every single day. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the family threw them a massive celebration. Children and grandchildren came from near and far, filling the house to bursting. There were speeches and toasts, embarrassing stories told, and favorite memories shared. Alice presented them with a beautiful quilt made from scraps of fabric that had belonged to each family member, a patchwork history of their years together. But the best gift came from Samuel. He stood up. His oldest son balanced on his hip and raised his glass. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd, "I know the story of how I came into this world, how my mother nearly died and my father, who was not my father yet, saved us both. How he delivered me in a barn during a blizzard and kept us warm and safe. I cannot remember any of that, of course, but I remember every day after. I remember a father who never once made me feel like I was not his real son, who taught me to ride and to work and to be a good man. and a mother who loved me fiercely from my first breath to this very moment." Samuel's voice cracked with emotion. "People say blood is thicker than water, but I am living proof that is not true. Love is what makes a family. Choice is what makes a family. And I am grateful every day that you chose me, Pa, that you chose us all." There was not a dry eye in the room. Yates stood and embraced Samuel, both men holding each other tightly. Hannah joined them, wrapping her arms around both her son and her husband, and the family erupted in applause and cheers. Later that night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Yates and Hannah walked out to the barn. It had been expanded and improved over the years, but the bones of it were the same. They stood in the spot where Samuel had been born, where their lives had irrevocably changed. "Sometimes I can still see it," Hannah said softly. "How it was that night. The storm outside, the animals restless, you with snow in your hair and fear in your eyes." "I was terrified," Yates admitted. "I kept thinking I was going to fail you, that I would lose you both." "But you did not," Hannah said, taking his hand. "You saved us, and then you loved us. You built this whole beautiful life for us." "We built it together," Yates corrected. "Every bit of it together." Hannah smiled and kissed him, there in the barn where it had all begun. "Together," she agreed. "Always together." The years continued to pass, as years do. Yates and Hannah grew older, their children fully grown with children of their own. The ranch that had started as barely more than a claim and a dream became one of the most successful operations in southern Colorado. Their grandchildren numbered in the dozens, with great-grandchildren beginning to arrive as well. On a cold December morning in 1910, Yates woke before dawn as he had every morning for over 50 years. He dressed quietly, trying not to wake Hannah, but she stirred anyway. After so many years together, they were attuned to each other's movements. "Where are you going?" she asked sleepily. "Just out to check on the animals," Yates said, "storm coming in. I can feel it in my bones." Hannah sat up, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "I will make coffee and breakfast." "You do not have to get up," Yates protested. "It is early yet." "After 40-plus years, you think I'm going to start sleeping in now?" Hannah said with a smile. "Come on, old man, let us start the day." They moved through their morning routine with the ease of long practice. Yates fed the animals while Hannah made coffee and biscuits. They ate together at the kitchen table, the house quiet around them. Most of their children had homes of their own now. Only Jacob still lived on the property, in his own house a quarter-mile away. After breakfast, Yates bundled up against the cold and headed out to check the fences. Hannah watched him go from the window. This man she had loved for so long. He was 70 now, his hair white, his movements slower than they once were. But he was still strong, still determined, still her Yates. The storm that hit that afternoon was not as bad as the blizzard of 1884, but it was significant. Snow fell thick and fast, driven by winds that howled around the house. Yates made it back before it got too dangerous, and he and Hannah settled in by the fire, content to wait it out together. "Do you remember the last big storm?" Yates asked, his arm around Hannah's shoulders. "I remember every moment of it," Hannah said. "The cold, the pain, the fear, and you, always you, keeping me going." "Best night of my life," Yates said. "The night I found you." "The night you saved me," Hannah corrected. "The night we saved each other," Yates said firmly. "Because, Hannah, I was lost before you, working myself to death for a dream that felt empty. You gave me a reason for all of it. You and the children, you made everything worthwhile." Hannah turned to kiss him, and they sat together watching the snow fall, remembering another storm a lifetime ago. That evening, Jacob and his family came over to make sure they were all right. The house filled with noise and warmth as grandchildren played, and Jacob helped Yates bring in extra wood for the fire. Over dinner, the conversation turned to family history, as it often did. "Tell us about the blizzard, Grandma," begged Emma, Jacob's oldest daughter. "When you and Grandpa met, Hannah glanced at Yates, who nodded encouragingly. She had told this story 100 times, but it never got old. So she told it again, describing the desperate walk through the snow, the pain of labor, the terror of thinking she would die alone. She told them about Yates finding her, about his steady hands and calm voice, about how he had delivered Samuel and kept them both alive through the worst storm she had ever seen. "And then what?" Emma asked, enthralled. "And then I fell in love with him," Hannah said simply. "Not right away, but slowly, over days and weeks. I fell in love with his kindness and his strength. I fell in love with the way he looked at my baby like he was the most precious thing in the world. I fell in love with the life I knew we could build together." "And you have been together ever since," Emma said with satisfaction. "Ever since," Hannah confirmed, "through good times and bad, sickness and health, for better and worse, just like we promised each other." Yates reached over and took Hannah's hand, squeezing gently. "Best promise I ever made," he said. The years that followed brought both joy and sorrow, as life always does. They lost friends to age and illness, watched the world change in ways both wonderful and unsettling. The new century brought automobiles and telephones, electricity and indoor plumbing. Yates adapted reluctantly, but Hannah embraced the changes, especially the indoor plumbing after years of hauling water. They celebrated their 30th, then their 40th wedding anniversary. Their family continued to expand exponentially. They lost count of the great-grandchildren after a while. There were simply too many to keep straight. But they loved them all. Loved the noise and chaos they brought, loved being surrounded by the living legacy of that night in 1884. On a warm June evening in 1915, Yates and Hannah sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done countless times before. Yates was 75 now, his body worn by decades of hard labor. Hannah was 73, her hair completely white, her hands gnarled with arthritis. But their minds were still sharp, their love still strong. "I have been thinking about what comes next," Yates said quietly, "when I am gone." "Do not talk like that," Hannah said sharply, though she knew it was a conversation they needed to have. "I am not planning on going anywhere soon," Yates assured her. "But Hannah, we are not young anymore, and I need you to know that the ranch is secure. Jacob knows how to run it, and Samuel will help him. Matthew has the horse breeding operation well in hand. The girls and their families are all settled and happy. When the time comes, you will be taken care of." "I do not care about any of that," Hannah said fiercely. "Money, land, none of it matters. All that matters is you." "I know," Yates said gently, "and you matter to me. That is why I need to know you will be all right." "I will be all right because I have had 31 years with you," Hannah said, tears streaming down her face. 31 years of love and laughter and life. When we started, I thought I had nothing left. You gave me everything, Yates, everything that matters." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "You gave me everything, too," he whispered into her hair. "A reason to live, not just exist. A family, a home, a purpose. You were my miracle, Hannah, my once-in-a-lifetime miracle." They held each other as the sun set and the stars emerged. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Yates lived another 3 years, sturdy and strong almost to the end. He died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1918, holding Hannah's hand. He was 78 years old and surrounded by the family he had helped create. Hannah was beside him, as she had been for 34 years, whispering that she loved him, that it was all right to rest now. The funeral was massive, with people coming from 3 counties to pay their respects. Yates Jennings had been a pillar of the community, known for his integrity and generosity. But the most moving tribute came from Samuel, now 54 years old and a grandfather himself. "My father saved my life before I ever drew breath," Samuel said, standing beside the grave. "He saved my mother and me from a blizzard, and then he spent the rest of his life making sure we had everything we needed. He loved me as his own, never making me feel less than his blood children. He taught me how to be a man, a husband, a father. Everything good in me came from him." Samuel's voice broke. "I will miss him every day for the rest of my life. But I am grateful, so grateful, that I got to be his son, that he chose me, chose us. He was the best man I ever knew, and I will spend my life trying to live up to the example he set." Hannah held Samuel's hand as her son spoke, tears streaming down her face. Yates was gone, but his legacy lived on in the dozen children and countless grandchildren who bore his name and his values. He lived on in the ranch that still thrived, in the community he had served, in the lives he had touched. Hannah lived another 5 years without Yates, years that felt both too long and too short. She stayed in the house they had built together, surrounded by family, refusing to be a burden but accepting their love and help. She told stories about Yates to the great and great-great-grandchildren who had never met him, keeping his memory alive. She spent her days in the garden Yates had built for her, in the kitchen where they had danced, on the porch where they had watched sunsets together. She read books and sewed quilts and wrote letters to far-flung family members, but mostly she remembered, cherishing the decades she had been blessed with. On a snowy February afternoon in 1923, Hannah felt a deep weariness settle into her bones. She was 81 years old, and she was tired. Samuel came to visit that day, as he did most days, bringing his great-grandson, a toddler named Yates, in honor of his great-great-grandfather. "Do you need anything, Mama?" Samuel asked, concern in his eyes at how pale she looked. "No, sweetheart," Hannah said, smiling at her firstborn. "I have everything I need. I have had everything I need for a very long time." She looked at little Yates, this child who would never remember her, but who carried on the name of the man she had loved. "You be good," she told him. "You honor the name you carry. Your great-great-grandfather was the finest man who ever lived." That night, as snow fell softly outside her window, Hannah closed her eyes for the last time. She died peacefully in her sleep, in the bed she had shared with Yates for over 3 decades. Her last thought was of a February night 39 years ago when a stranger had found her dying in the snow and saved her life, giving her a future she never dreamed possible. They buried Hannah beside Yates in the cemetery overlooking La Junta. The entire town turned out for the funeral, 3 generations of Jennings family members among them. The preacher spoke of a life well lived, of faith and love and family, but it was Jacob who gave the final eulogy. "My mother was the strongest person I ever knew," Jacob said, his voice steady despite his grief. "She survived things that would have broken most people. She lost a husband, nearly lost her life, nearly lost her firstborn before he even entered the world. But she survived, and more than that, she thrived. She built a family and a home and a legacy that will outlast all of us." Jacob looked out at the crowd, at the faces of his siblings and nieces and nephews and cousins. "She taught us that love is a choice, that family is built, not just born, that the worst moments can lead to the best life. She and my father took a tragedy and turned it into triumph. They took a blizzard night and turned it into a love story that will be told for generations." As they lowered Hannah's casket into the ground beside Yates, the sun broke through the clouds, sending shafts of golden light across the snow-covered cemetery. It felt like a benediction, a promise that the love that had begun in a barn during a blizzard would continue on in the lives they had touched and the family they had created. The ranch continued to prosper under Jacob's management, and then under his sons, and then their sons. The house that Yates built and Hannah had filled with love remained in the family, expanded and modernized, but fundamentally the same. Every generation knew the story of the blizzard, of how their family had begun with an act of mercy and grown into something beautiful. Samuel lived to be 92. Telling his great-great-grandchildren about the father who had delivered him in a barn and loved him as his own. Rose and Lily lived long lives surrounded by children and grandchildren. Jacob ran the ranch until he was 80, stubborn and strong like his father. Grace wrote a book about her parents' love story that became a local bestseller. Matthew and Mark, those twin terrors, lived into their 90s, still playing pranks on each other in the nursing home. The story of Yates and Hannah Jennings became part of La Junta's history, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. The barn where Samuel was born was preserved and eventually turned into a small museum about ranching life in 1880s Colorado. The house became a gathering place for the sprawling Jennings family, who met there every year for a reunion that took over the entire property. And on February nights, when the snow fell hard and the wind howled, the people of La Junta would remember the story of the woman who collapsed in labor in the snow, and the cowboy who delivered her baby and kept them warm. They would remember how a moment of crisis had become a lifetime of love. They would remember that sometimes the worst storms lead to the brightest dawn, and that love can bloom even in the deepest cold. Because that was the truth that Yates and Hannah had proved with their lives, that love is not about perfect circumstances or ideal timing. Love is about showing up when someone needs you. Love is about choosing someone every day. Love is about building something together that outlasts both of you. Their love had started in desperation and snow, but it had grown into something warm and enduring and beautiful. It had produced children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward their values of hard work and kindness and family. It had built a ranch and a home and a legacy that would last for generations. Yates Jennings had found Hannah Anderson dying in the snow outside his barn on a February night in 1884. He had saved her life and delivered her baby and kept them warm through a blizzard that should have killed them. And in doing so, he had found his own salvation, his own reason for being, his own happily ever after. They had lived and loved and built a life together for 34 years, and their story had lived on long after both of them were gone, because that is what true love does. It endures. It multiplies. It becomes something larger than just two people. It becomes a legacy. And so the story of the cowboy and the woman in the snow lived on, told around dinner tables and campfires, passed down from generation to generation, a reminder that love can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes being saved means saving someone else, and that the greatest adventures often begin with a single act of mercy on a cold winter night.